Hi, welcome to Tales of Dread. The story for tonight is about a group of friends who go camping for a week and try to be heroes. Keep watching. Make sure to subscribe, click that bell, and smash that thumbs up. Now let's get into it. Okay then, to explain things. I'm 20 years old and in my second year of college. This summer, I'll start my third year. This wasn't how it was supposed to be right now. I'm on my way to ship an old truck somewhere in the middle of the woods. I have no idea where I am because my phone doesn't even work. This is what I'm writing in the notes app. It all started last week when two of my friends and I decided to go camping. I had been camping with my family since I was a child, so I knew what to bring. I had a tent, a fire starter, a few sleeping bags, heavy-duty bug spray and tick spray, a Swiss Army knife for carrying convenience, a pocket knife, and even a book about the local plants. Even if my friends didn't know what they were doing, they could rely on me. Thankfully, they did know how to cook over a campfire. So I wasn't the only one who had to work. So, we put everything in the trunk of one of my friend's cars and drove to the site. I set up the tent and made a fire when I got there. We got there late, after 6, and it was strange that there were no other campers. To be honest, this should have made me suspicious. I should have packed up our stuff and gotten us out of there as soon as possible. But the site was cheap and there was no charge for the ice. Who would refuse to see for free? We had hot dogs for dinner and s'mores for dessert. When we put out the fire for the night, that's when we realized we weren't the only ones around. Another fire was started. It was far away, so it looked like a tiny spot of reddish-orange light. That night, when the four of us got into our sleeping bags and tried to sleep, I remember feeling both happy and relieved. About an hour later, one of my friends, who I'll call John for the sake of the story, said, "Dude, what the hell? Get away from me." John was the smartest of all of us. So I thought someone had rolled around enough in their sleeping bag to get on top of him. But when I looked, I didn't see anyone. "John, what are you talking about? No one is there?" I said I was tired, and the other two hadn't even woken up yet. When John looked around the tent and saw that nobody was even close to being on top of him, he seemed more surprised than anything else. That was just the start. After an hour, I felt something crawling up my leg, across my midsection, up my neck, and into my face. I thought it was just a harmless spider, of course. But then I felt my arm being pulled. I was scared, so I sat up in the tent and looked around frantically. When I looked at my friends, I saw that they were sleeping peacefully. Then it happened again and again. Every hour when I started the fire to make breakfast, one of us would be startled awake. I saw that there was another tent near our site as well. It couldn't have been the person who had that fire last night, and I didn't see a tent in that general area, so I wasn't sure if the person had decided they didn't like the spot and moved. Even though it was possible, you shouldn't switch sides. The others shuffled out of the tent, and one of them looked like he had been through hell. It seemed like they hadn't slept at all. I think I mostly looked the same. I cooked eggs in a cast-iron skillet on top of the grate over the fire. John got a Monster Energy drink out of the cooler and threw it to one of our other friends, who I'll call Alice for the sake of this story. I'll call Betty whoever comes out of the tent last. She sat on the floor with her legs crossed next to the picnic bench at the camp. Alice had opened the Monster drink and was sitting next to Betty, but she didn't sit down until she got paper plates for all of us to use for the eggs. "Did you see that tent yesterday?" Betty asked. I replied by shaking my head. Maybe he was the guy who started that fire last night, and decided he liked us. So, he moved his tent a little closer. When John said this, he laughed, but it made me feel uneasy. Alice said, "That's weird if he did," and I agreed with a hum. That night was the same. One difference is that we heard scratching at our tent about a half hour after we got into our sleeping bags. This happened every hour, and something else woke one of us up every hour as well. Then, it happened on the third, fourth, and fifth nights. Alice woke up on the sixth night with deep cuts on her left arm. Betty woke up with a cut on her right thigh, and when John woke up, he pretty much flew out of the tent while throwing up. I had a long cut on my stomach when I woke up. When it was morning, all of these wounds were gone by the seventh day, and no one remembered much except me, I guess. On that night, the seventh night, we all heard a woman screaming in the woods. She seemed sad. She sounded as though she was in terrible pain. She didn't sound too far away, so we could help her. So we did. We all got out of the tent and started running. John tripped on some tree roots and hurt his ankle enough that he told us to keep going without him. So, Betty, Alice, and I were the only ones running after this woman's screams. As we ran toward the screams, she seemed to be getting farther and farther away. We finally got to a small clearing with a house that was more of a shack than anything else. It wasn't big. And as we got closer, we saw that all the windows were broken and the door was off its hinges. We went in because it was obvious that we would. There was a metal table in the middle of the room, just like the ones in a hospital morgue. On the table was a woman whose mouth was wide open and she was missing teeth. Next to her was a pair of bloody pliers. Alice screamed, and Betty turned white as a ghost and threw up for some reason. Instead of acting like everyone else, I walked over to the woman sitting at the table. She was very thin, almost too thin to live. I thought that she hadn't eaten yet because her eyes were so wide open. In fact, when you looked more closely, you could see that her eyelids had been cut off. They weren't there, and they weren't on the table. Her eyes were ringed with dried blood. I had to go to the bathroom. I almost did. My gut told me to pull out my phone and call the police, but when I looked at my phone, I saw that it wasn't working. I turned around to ask Betty or Alice if their phones worked, but they were already gone. A man stood in their place. He was dressed in a lumberjack outfit that looked like something out of a cartoon. I yelled, and he took a clumsy step toward me. I was confused about what to do. This man could have been the guy who was torturing this woman, or he could be in the same situation as my friends and I, but I remembered that Alice and Betty were both gone, and that man was in their place. I happened to look down at the floor, and to my surprise, they were both knocked out on the floor. The man had a hammer, 4 knives, and 4 more knives. I'm in this truck now. The sun is just coming up. I could hear something moving in the woods, though. I'm not sure if I'll get out of here alive. I just hope that he won't look at this truck supplemental. This was on the notes app of a Samsung Galaxy Model S22 that was otherwise empty. When they got to the site, the only thing in the truck was a phone. A 1956 Ford F100 blank was nowhere to be found, and the search for blank is still going on. No one has found any of blank's friends who were mentioned in the note. They are also still being looked for. 2 miles from the truck, in the house mentioned in the note, there was neither a table nor a woman. The house had been left behind. The only signs of life were a mattress in the corner of the room next door and puddles of water in the bathroom and sink. So far, the family hasn't said anything, except to say that the note's timeline fits with theirs and adds more information. Well, I hope the story tonight was fun for you guys. If there's one thing you can learn from this, it's that you can't always be a hero, because sometimes that just doesn't work. Like, comment, and subscribe, share me with your friends, and spread me around like butter. Yes, have a good night and keep being scary.